As the pursuers gained on her, she opened with her secondary battery. Even now she received no serious injury, and she was never set on fire, but her captain, Moreau, realized that lack of speed had put him at the mercy of the enemy. As they closed in upon him and opened fire with their heaviest guns, he turned his ship into the creek surrounded by towering heights, amid which the little Tarquino River runs into the sea, 48 miles west of Morro Castle. He hauled down his flag as he entered the creek. Without his orders, the engineers opened the Kingston valves in the engine room, and when the Americans boarded the Colon she was rapidly sinking. She went down by the stern under the cliffs on the east side of the inlet, and lay with her bow above water and her afterdecks awash. It was 20 minutes past 1 when she surrendered. The men of the Iowa and Gloucester had meanwhile rescued many of the survivors of the Vizcaya, not without serious risk to themselves, for there were numerous explosions and the decks were red hot in places. Some of the Spaniards swam ashore, made their way through the bush to Santiago, and joined the garrison. Captain Eulate was brought on board the Iowa, and received by a guard of marines, who presented arms as he stepped from the gangway. He offered his sword to Robley Evans, but the American captain refused to take it. "You have surrendered," he said, "to 4 ships, each heavier than your own. You did not surrender to the Iowa only, so her captain cannot take your sword." Never in any naval action was there such complete destruction of a fleet. Of the 6 ships that steamed out of Santiago that summer morning, the Furor was sunk in deep water off the entrance, the Pluton was ashore under the Zacapa cliff. At various points along the coast, columns of black smoke rising 1,000 feet into the sunlit sky showed where the burning wrecks of the Maria Teresa, the Oquendo, and the Vizcaya lay, and nearly 50 miles away the Colon was sunk at the mouth of the Tarquino River. And never was success obtained with such a trifling loss to the victors. The Spanish gunnery had been wretchedly bad. The only ships hit were the Brooklyn and the Iowa, and neither received any serious damage. The only losses by the enemy's fire were on board the Brooklyn, where a signalman was killed and 2 seamen wounded. 9 men were more or less seriously injured by the concussion of their own guns. It must be confessed that the gunnery of the Americans was not of a high order. Some 6,500 shells were expended during the action. The Spanish wrecks were carefully examined, and all hits counted. Fires and explosion perhaps obliterated the traces of some of them, but so far as could be ascertained, the hits on the hulls and the upper works were comparatively few, and of hits by the heavy 13-inch and 12-inch guns, only 2 could be traced anywhere. The Spanish squadron had 2,300 officers and men on board when it left Santiago. Of these, 1,600 were prisoners after the action. It was estimated that in the fight 350 were killed and 150 wounded. This leaves some 200 to be accounted for. Nearly 150 rejoined the garrison of Santiago after swimming ashore. This leaves only 50 missing. They were probably drowned or killed by the Cuban guerrillas. The fact that 3 of the Spanish cruisers had been rendered helpless by fires lighted on board by the enemy's shells accentuated the lesson already learned from the Battle of the Yalu as to the necessity of eliminating inflammable material in the construction and fittings of warships. The damage done to the Vizcaya by the explosion of one of her own torpedoes in her bow tube proved the reality of a danger to which some naval critics had already called attention. Henceforth the torpedo tubes of cruisers and battleships were all made to open below the waterline. The result of the victory was a complete change in the situation at Santiago. The destruction of Cervera's fleet was the beginning of the end for the Spanish power in Cuba. End of Chapter 13. Recording by Alan Winterowd. Boomcoach.blogspot.com